Tonight, airport agony, flight cancellations climb as a strike by WestJet engineers keeps planes parked. Stranded and stressed, tens of thousands of travelers left in limbo.
We sleep here.
The airline demanding action from the federal government as technicians stand their ground.
To fly legally, it has to be certified by us.
Pride parades celebrate inclusivity.
It's a fight that can't stop.
Party leaders pledge their attendance while Pierre Poilievre's plans remain unclear. Plus, early results in France's high-stakes legislative elections.
Its support has been increasing.
The far-right National Party leaps into a strong lead. And honoring a fallen hero.
It is the unknown warrior, so it needs to represent all the others.
Marking a historic Memorial Day 100 years later.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. One of the country's largest airlines was forced to cancel hundreds more flights today. A strike by maintenance engineers at WestJet, keeping planes grounded. The work stoppage now upending the plans of more than 100,000 travelers over the Canada Day long weekend. Since Thursday, WestJet has canceled more than 800 flights scheduled between then and Monday. The action has prompted the carrier to demand more intervention from the federal government. CTV's Christina Tenalia reports.
Alfredo is an aircraft maintenance engineer with 14 years on the job. He says a pilot can't fly a plane without his signature.
To fly legally, it has to be certified by us.
No engineers, no flights. It's not only a matter of safety, it's the law. For a second straight day, about 680 unionized airline maintenance engineers hit picket lines at Toronto, Calgary, and Vancouver's international airports. That's where this stranded traveler was forced to spend the night.
We sleep here. Just imagine, from a long trip, they did not even give us an accommodation.
WestJet and the union spent the day with federal mediators, with the workers saying the two sides can't close a 7% gap in the overall cost of their first collective agreement.
It's uncharted territory. So when WestJet went to the labor minister asking for a referral to binding arbitration, I think they presumed that would draw an end to the strike scenario. And we challenged that on a legal basis, and the board sided in our favor. We are, in fact, in a legal strike position.
And although the labor minister respected a recent order that permits workers to hit the picket lines, today, Alberta and Saskatchewan's premiers asked for another intervention, with the airline doubling down. In a statement, WestJet's president says the company is in receipt of a binding arbitration order and await urgent clarity from the government that a strike and arbitration cannot exist simultaneously. Labor Minister Seamus O'Regan is said to be considering all options, while WestJet says they've had to park more planes, diminishing their fleet from about 180 planes down to about 30, with those planes operating on a reduced travel schedule. And if there is no deal reached as soon as possible, there'll be more travel disruptions to come. Christina Tenalia, CTV News, Toronto.
Canada's largest Pride parade came to a halt today when demonstrators in Toronto caused a disruption.
It was a shame, just because Pride is such a big event and being such a support of the community, it was a shame to have it shut down.
Protesters sat in the middle of a main street, one group with a Palestinian flag. Pride Toronto canceled the remainder of the parade without requesting police intervention, saying they respect people's right to protest and that the decision was made to ensure public safety. For some, it was a disappointing end to an event attended by hundreds of thousands of people. But at least one person was noticeably absent. CTV's Colton Prale explains.
Loud, crowd, and an explosion of love and color. The 43rd Toronto Pride, a celebration of acceptance. and a reminder of the continued fight for queer equality.
It's a fight that can't stop. I mean, we see what's going on in the States, and we're concerned about some of the things that are happening here in Canada.
The past year raising caution for some in the LGBTQ2S+ community after changes to the use of students' preferred pronouns in schools in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and New Brunswick.
That's why allies are needed more than ever right now, just like they were back in 2005, just like they were back in the AIDS crisis. Like, we are seeing this level again, and we need it more than ever.
Today, the Prime Minister tweeting, "Pride is about the freedom to be who you are and love whom you love," and posing for pictures with supporters in Toronto's gay village. Pierre Poilievre is the only federal leader who won't say if he plans to march in a pride parade this summer. Instead, his spokesperson highlighting an appearance by Deputy Leader Melissa Lantsman at a pride flag raising this month, and these comments made last year.
My purpose is to make Canada the freest country in the world, the freedom for everybody, including gays and lesbians.
But in Toronto, the focus solely on those here today.
Happy Pride!
Hate crimes jumped 12% against queer individuals in 2022, according to Stats Canada. Experts say it will take a top-down message of inclusion and tolerance to cool rising hate. Heather.
Colton, thank you. 2 incidents believed to be hate-motivated are under investigation this weekend in Toronto. Police say this person threw rocks through the windows of 2 synagogues in the city's north end around 3 o'clock this morning before fleeing on a motorbike. Anyone who recognizes the person is urged to come forward. French voters have propelled the far-right National Party to a dominating lead in the first round of legislative elections. SCTV's Jeremy Charon reports it has plunged the country into political uncertainty.
Met by a sea of French flags, far-right leader Marine Le Pen celebrated with supporters tonight, following a strong showing in a high-stakes election. The French people have demonstrated their desire to turn the page, she says. Her National Rally Party received a third of the vote Sunday, trailed by the leftist group New Popular Front, with President Emmanuel Macron's centrist party trailing in third. To drive the reform this country needs, we need an absolute majority, she says. Macron shocked the world, calling a snap election in June after his party suffered a blow from the right in the European parliamentary elections.
His big gamble that once the parliamentary elections for the EU was over, people would revert to what's really important to them, their local, the national election of their own, would thrust him back into power. He may be on the edge of losing that gamble.
Motivated voters across France helped drive turnout to nearly 60% today, the highest for a first round of parliamentary elections since the mid-'80s. We hope to block the National Party, says this couple, while other voters are ready for something different. We need change. Maybe it will be better. Right now, nothing is being done. Now, while these first-round results offer a picture of voter sentiment, what France's National Assembly will really look like will be decided in the runoff vote on July 7th.
A lot depends on what happens between the first round and the second round. The way the French legislative elections work is rather peculiar.
If the National Rally sees the same kind of success a week from now, President Macron could be forced to appoint a far-right prime minister who would have great power when it comes to domestic decisions in France. Heather?
All right, Jeremy, thank you. Still in Europe, at least 7 people have been killed by ferocious storms sweeping across Switzerland and Italy. Fast-moving floodwaters cascading over cliffs, swelling rivers in northern Italian towns. The deluge triggering landslides, burying cars in Switzerland, flooding roads and causing the partial collapse of a bridge. In western Turkey, an explosion killed 5 people and left more than 60 others injured. Security video shows the moment a propane tank exploded at a restaurant in the city of Izmir. The force of the blast catapulting debris onto the road, damaging several nearby buildings. Authorities say 1 man has been arrested. He had replaced the propane tank with a new one yesterday. And a deadly weekend in northern Nigeria when coordinated suicide bombings killed at least 18 people, including children and pregnant women. At least 30 others were injured after 3 female attackers targeted a wedding, a funeral, and a hospital. No one immediately claimed responsibility for the attack. Canada's men's soccer team showcased true grit, making history at the Copa America. The excitement surrounding the squad has opened up a new opportunity for Canada to stamp its place on the international soccer stage. CTV's Kamal Karamali has more.
There's the final whistle. It is over.
This is the moment history was made in Canadian soccer. The men's team moving on to the Copa America quarterfinals.
We're happy we were able to advance, and we're happy to make history.
You see, this is the first time Canada has even appeared in Copa America, one of the world's oldest soccer tournaments, where countries in South America go head-to-head, joined by a limited number of North American teams. Canada started the tournament losing to the Goliath Argentinian team, then bounced back to beat Peru 1-0. The tie with Chile launched them into the knockout round, a surreal outcome for a team that had no expectations going into the tournament.
You have to really be impressed by the way Canada kept its composure in such an important game.
For many, this historic accomplishment is not only about making soccer more popular in our country, but creating a worldwide reputation for Canada as a soccer nation. Sports bars across the country tuned into European matches this Sunday, but the buzz still about Canada.
It was actually quite exciting. It's been a long time.
Soccer announcer Adam Jenkins says this men's team is making the soccer world start to take notice. So is Canada finally a soccer nation on the international stage?
We're not. We're not close, to be honest.
What's holding us back then?
The biggest thing I think holding Canada back right now is infrastructure. We have 2 or 3 at the most proper stadia in this country that can host these big events.
One of the biggest results in Canadian men's soccer history.
Until Canada catches up to the so-called soccer nations, their underdog story continues here at Copa America, with the new chapter still being written when Canada plays its quarterfinal match on July 5th. Kamal Karamali, CTV News, Toronto.
There is new hope for the future of Canada's most endangered mammals, the Vancouver Island marmot. As CTV's BC Bureau Chief Andrew Johnson shows us, a 2-decade-long recovery effort is saving the species from extinction.
A tentative young marmot has a lot to take in during the first few moments of its new life in the wild.
It's the culmination of a whole year's worth of effort to see these marmots in the wild for the first time.
They're raised in captivity in partnership with zoos in Calgary and Toronto, then travel to their home turf, Vancouver Island's Mount Washington, the only region these cousins of the groundhog can be found anywhere on the planet.
This is the only endemic mammal species in British Columbia, one of only 4 endemic mammal species in Canada. Really, if we don't save the marmot, nobody else is going to. So, and it's a special animal. This is our species.
A social species with plenty of personality, which becomes quickly apparent to the volunteers toting them to the release site.
Mine was pretty loud. His name was Lamar. He was squeaking a lot.
They're endearing, but endangered. When the Marmot Recovery Foundation began its work in 2003, there were fewer than 30 left living in the wild. Now the population is pushing 300, dozens living on the slopes of Mount Washington, fast asleep during the ski season.
Still a critically endangered species, but the recovery certainly seems to be going in the right direction right now.
The group plans to release 60 marmots this year, but not all of them will survive. They're commonly hunted by eagles, wolves, and cougars. Their fate will be tracked by the team that spends months planning each release.
So we'll follow the locations very closely over the next few weeks, and our hope is that most of them will stay put pretty close to home.
Adding to a small population still at risk, but beginning to thrive. Andrew Johnson, CTV News, Vancouver.
Coming up, marking Newfoundland's Memorial Day.
It is the unknown warrior, so it needs to represent all the others.
Preparations for a solemn service in St. John's. Plus, a reunion almost 4 decades in the making. From coast to coast tomorrow, Canadians will celebrate the country's 157th birthday. But in Newfoundland, it's also Memorial Day, a solemn occasion which has been marked since 1917, decades before Newfoundland joined Confederation. Soldiers spent the day rehearsing to honor one of their own, as this year Memorial Day will carry special significance. CTV's chief anchor, Omar Sachedina, is in St. John's. And Omar, tomorrow's ceremony will include a special commemoration.
That's right, Heather. More than 100 years after a young man from the Newfoundland Regiment left his home on a ship across the Atlantic to fight on a French battlefield in the First World War, he will finally be laid to rest here on home soil at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. The trenches of Beaumont-Hamel in France are like scars of a fight, part of Newfoundland and Labrador's identity. On July 1st, 1916, on these fields, the Newfoundland Regiment, which had about 800 soldiers, was all but wiped out by the Germans. Military historian Frank Gogos describes that morning as a massacre. Soldiers knew they were walking to their deaths.
They saw the blood and the dead and the dying in the communication trenches and the frontline trenches. And then their CO comes along, their commanding officer comes along and says, yeah, we're going to attack.
And the fact they still pushed forward, I mean, it was an order. They had to.
It was an order, they had to do it, but there was also a sense of pride that you were not going to let your buddies down. And they went. And they didn't charge, they walked. And they were told not to run. And one of the officers was there that day, later tells the story. It was like they were walking into a blizzard, because Newfoundlanders instinctively dropped their chin down and walked forward. And this is kind of what the soldiers were doing to protect themselves.
They're tucking in their chins.
Yeah.
To protect
themselves. As if they're going into a snowstorm, but instead of hail and snow, it's bullets.
Today, farmers are still discovering artifacts and sometimes even remains. And when they do, they call a recovery unit, which responds within a couple of hours. There's a sense of urgency because looters have been known to steal the remains. As for Newfoundland's unknown soldier, who will be reinterred tomorrow, there was a deliberate decision not to carry out a detailed DNA investigation about his identity. The Commonwealth War Grave Commission's head of recovery unit explains why.
Because it is the unknown warrior, so it needs to represent all the others. For the unknown warrior, we want the warrior to remain unknown, because otherwise it defeats the purpose of symbolizing all the fallen.
And that toll is staggering. More than 1,700 Newfoundlanders lost their lives in the First World War. Almost half of those have no known graves. Valor and sacrifice, Heather, that will be commemorated here tomorrow.
What a historic moment that will be. Omar, thank you. And be sure to join Omar as he broadcasts live from St. John's for the CTV News special Newfoundland's Unknown Soldier on July 1st at 8 a.m. Eastern. Still ahead tonight, a craving some can't live without. How coffee could be coated in your jeans. Is Java in your jeans? Love it or loathe it? New Canadian research suggests a person's coffee consumption could be determined by their DNA. CTV's Alison Bamford on the genetic link.
Even in the coffee business, not everyone craves the caffeine rush.
I try not to let it do that to me, so I don't have coffee till after I eat and a couple hours after I wake up.
This Regina coffee shop is busy with afternoon customers, but those behind the counter already had their fill for the day.
I just drink a double espresso every morning. I think I can only have like 1 cup of coffee and then I'm out for the day.
Drinking habits that could be a product of genetics.
There are a lot of different factors that are going to influence whether or not somebody decides to drink coffee, and genetics is only one part of that.
Researchers out of Western University and California compared the genetics of hundreds of thousands of people in the United States and the UK, finding certain gene variants likely play a role in how much coffee we consume, based on how our bodies process it.
If you are somebody who processes caffeine very quickly, you may intake more of it so that you get that effect. Because for you, 2 cups of coffee would be the equivalent of somebody who drinks 1 cup of coffee who metabolizes or processes it more slowly.
But the findings go farther than a cup of joe. The study showing those genetically predisposed to consume coffee are also genetically linked to obesity and substance use.
That's not to say necessarily that they will consume those substances, but the genetics underlying those traits tend to be shared.
These traits may vary by region, something researchers hope to continue studying, because the better we understand genetics and the links to disorders, they say down the road we can better develop treatments. Allison Bamford, CTV News, Regina.
After the break, a woman's emotional reunion with the father she never knew. Finally for us tonight, family ties reconnected decades later. A precious reunion between father and daughter, now making up for lost time. And it was made possible with the help of strangers. Here's CTV's Adam Sawatsky.
Tanya Ellis is in the midst of an unexpected journey.
So excited and nervous.
So looking forward to sharing the books in her bag.
He's gonna love seeing these, I'm sure.
These happy memories of baby Tanya and her birth father before he left when she was 5 and she never heard from him again.
We were always just told the same thing, that it was due to mental health issues.
That was almost 4 decades ago, long before we knew what we now know about mental health, and Tanya's feelings couldn't have been more complicated.
Always in the back of your mind that there's something not right with yourself, right? That they leave you.
And while you keep moving forward, perhaps like Tanya, lucky enough to have a wonderful family that includes an adopted dad, everything seems to stop when out of the blue a stranger calls to say your birth father is looking for you.
I mean, I was shocked, you know, and she kept asking me, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm okay. I can't even believe this is happening."
Yet 3 days later, Tanya had flown from Ontario to BC to visit a hospice facility in Vancouver's downtown east side to meet her birth father for the first time in 38 years.
Let's give him a big giant hug, and it was just beautiful. It was really nice.
If you ask Glenn how the reunion was for him, the man of few words will show you how he felt.
That's a big smile.
Because it's not every day you get to say how proud you are of the woman your little girl grew up to be.
That's so nice.
And there have been countless happy moments after he and Tanya were brave enough to say all the things they needed to say to start turning hurt into healing.
Love.
Love is what Glenn says he's learned life is all about. And although what life he has left is limited,
how big is the love?
Vast. The depth of love he feels for Tanya and the other family members he's been reunited with is limitless.
I can now feel a peace in my life that I've never felt before.
And the photo album that once featured too many blank pages will now be filled with so many happy memories. Adam Sawatsky, CTV News, Vancouver.
That is our newscast for this Sunday evening. I'm Heather Butts. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Be sure to join Omar tomorrow as he broadcasts from St. John's. Have a happy Canada Day. Good night.